Right. So, why am I here to talk to you? Well, I've been through LGR in two different ways. The first was on the back end of LGR. I picked up an organisation that had gone through it, and it was experiencing the legacy of it. So I'll tell you about that in a minute. And the other one was actually went through the whole process. So familiar with the term vesting day? That's this big day that's going to call it vesting day when it all happens. So that was pre-vesting day and post-vesting day. Both times, one was managing a leisure trust in Northumberland. That was the legacy stuff. And the other one was North Yorkshire, managing a local authority trading company for leisure in North Yorkshire. So a lot of lessons learned from both scenarios, a lot of lessons learned. And the lessons are hard learned for me as well, because I really care. And I think, leisure as a family, we all really care, don't we? It's a kind of, we're really passionate about what we do. We want to make a difference to people and communities. We want to make sure every penny we spend is spent well on communities. We really care about that. So when we make decisions, we don't make them lightly, and we do them for each other and our communities. And we know what we're doing, and we want to make the right decisions. And suddenly when you're in an LGR situation, sometimes it can feel like decisions are being made for you and you're not necessarily consulted, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But in the case of Northumberland and North Yorkshire, there was loads of good stuff to share, loads of good stuff, but some real key lessons learned. And when Northumberland went through LGR in 2012, which is probably more famous for the Olympics, wasn't that great? Amazing. But it went through LGR in 2012, and the chief executive at the time in the new unitary council decided that he was going to form one big trust, one big leisure trust, and they terminated the contracts of all leisure trusts, and they were all leisure trusts, some big national providers, some local trusts, terminated the contracts early, and within the first 18 months there was this big leisure trust formed. And that's what he did. So, of course, you had this amalgamation of all these different cultures and ways of doing things just thrust together really quickly. And that was really difficult for them. It was really hard. So much so that leisure trust, Active Northumberland, had 4 different chief executives over 5 years, in the first 5 years as an operation. So read into that what you will, but clearly it was quite a hard job to be chief executive, picking up that legacy where suddenly everything's been thrust together. I was the 5th. I lasted longer than the previous 4, yay, but didn't last that long, but that's another story. But I think we got a lot of good stuff done when I was there. And one of the things that we did do, after 5 years of that leisure organisation being formed, was harmonise terms and conditions. It took 5 years. 5 years where people in one leisure site were getting paid more or less than another leisure site with different T's and C's. Now, you all know, as leisure professionals and managers and leaders, how hard it would be to maintain performance in an environment where people are going, as a duty manager there, they're getting 5 or 6 grand a year more than me. And it's been like that for the past 5 years. That's not good, is it? So that was a really bad example of where you can get with a legacy of LGR that's not been planned and managed effectively. There was other good stuff going on there. And eventually we resolved that and we did it, and it cost the council nearly 4 million in terms of pay harmonisation across that trust. So that was a bill they didn't expect to get. And there was other stuff going on in the council which was difficult in terms of forming a new positive culture. It was very difficult for them. But eventually they got there and all was good, but it was the time that was taken. And then in North Yorkshire, I originally was employed by Harrogate Borough Council to set up a local authority trading company. They wanted to put the services out into a trading company to get some tax efficiencies. They also had a big capital budget, 60 million. It was only a relatively small borough council, but it had the biggest leisure stock in North Yorkshire, about an 8 million turnover. And they wanted to put it out to a trading company to drive the capital programme and to achieve efficiencies. So I did that, and we hit targets and we did a lot of good stuff. But only after 2.5 years, we knew we were going to go into vesting day in LGR. So for me, it was about preparing that organisation for that and doing the best we possibly could be to feature in the future, which is what we wanted to do. But I learned a lot of lessons from that, which I'll share with you during the course of this presentation. So for me, the whole experience has not been easy, but really challenging. It felt like we were building the plane while we were flying it. How do you all feel? In one word, what does it mean for you, LGR? Anybody want to volunteer in one word? What does it mean? How does it make you feel? How are you feeling right now about it? Anyone want to be bold and brave and throw a word out there?
Uncertainty.
Pardon?
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty. Yep, totally understand that. Opportunity. Yep. So we're
Job security.
Job security. 2 words.
Security.
Security. Yeah. So for me, I capture those 2 words. For me, it felt exciting because I like change, basically. If things aren't changing and moving on, then I'm not happy. So I like change. And but on the other side of me, I felt vulnerable, particularly in the North Yorkshire experience, where we'd set this new company up, we were doing really well, and suddenly it felt like the risk was we'd have the rug pulled and we couldn't continue all these great foundations that we'd built and lead the legacy we want to do. So I felt vulnerable. But at the same time, I always realised it wasn't just about me, and other people had a view about doing things. So it wasn't about me getting my own way all the time. So I really recognised that. But there was a vulnerability. And I thought this through, and I thought, well, I'm feeling excited because there's an outcome to be had, which is about doing lots of stuff we already do better, because we've got economies of scale. We're going to be part of a bigger entity. So we're going to be more efficient, and the more efficient we are in terms of back office and everything they're doing, the more money we can put into frontline services, developing our assets, giving the customers a better experience and reaching out to people that aren't using us. So I thought that's really, really positive. And we can scale up our partnerships as well in terms of health partnerships at a kind of broader geographical level, a sub-regional level. And I thought that'd be good to have a stronger voice, into agencies like Activity Partnerships and Sport England and things like that. So loads of exciting opportunities, and probably a shared outcome with everybody else that was going through it, whether you're in-house in a trust or a trading company. Everyone's thinking about those opportunities. That was the common ground. Where I felt vulnerable, having really kind of tried to understand where that feeling was coming from, it was around the process. Because it took me ages to make these things fly in. So the event is inevitable, isn't it? Which is vesting day LGR. The outcome is we can all agree on kind of what we want that to look like. Everybody in this room will be thinking, yeah, actually, agree with Mark, that's what I want. That's where I want us to go. But our response can be quite different in terms of the process, because we're all going to go about that in a different way. So it can be right from, well, I think in-house is the best model. I think a trust is the best model. Actually, trading company sounds good. That might be the sweet spot between 2. Actually, this is how I think we should be running, gyms. This is how our pricing structure should run. This is how we should have different, this is how we should treat our hierarchies and our management teams, and how we call service development up, community development with operations. You've all got a different idea about what it looks like and the process to get there, haven't you? So this is the bit that can be contentious. Now, if you are thinking about this stuff, and some of you might be, it's probably more relevant for councils actually that we're speaking to this morning, that are going to have to organise this on a grand scale, multiple services, big organisations, and how will they integrate. But this stuff is the important stuff, isn't it? It's all about being safe and legal. Have you heard of that expression, safe and legal? So, the policy teams and the chief execs of the council and everything else will be going, safe and legal, safe and legal. Not surprising, is it? Because councils, we're all quite risk averse in the public sector, aren't we? It's got to be safe and legal. That's got to be our priority. And it's all good stuff. And then post-vesting day, this is where the opportunities really kick in. And we want to crystallise these, don't we? We want that kind of scale economy. We want to get into a position where we've got consistent service standards. We want to be able to think, actually, can we make some of those decisions around looking at the estate? How does it look like across the whole of East Lancs, and what needs modernisation, and how can we bring everything up to an equal level? Because there may be some councils in the room that have had a bit more capital than others, and you want to get some equilibrium around that. So that's a real opportunity. Scale up with funded bids, stuff like that. So loads of really exciting stuff. And we've got a narrative around this as well. So if you've said any of those things, I forgive you. I have too. But people look at things differently, and you will all be looking at this process differently. And more importantly, people that you manage in your teams will be looking at this differently. And particularly if you come out with stuff like that, people might have another interpretation of what that means. And we have to be really mindful of that going through big change processes. Because this is a reality. This is the stuff that's said outside the room. And one of my lessons learned from LGR in both scenarios was, doesn't matter how good the stand-ups were, like me coming to talk to you today, and you talking to your teams, or people from the council talking to you, or whatever it might be, it's the stuff that's said outside the room that connects. And it's the stuff outside the room that needs to be, that's the real judge of the culture. So that's the important thing, and how do we do that? Because people see things differently. We're all different. And that's fine, it's just the way we're made up. But the challenge we've got is the time period here, because my experience at North Yorkshire was there was a view that safe and legal was really important, absolutely right. But in terms of the consolidation afterwards and how it was all going to look like, it was just going to take our time. We don't need to rush. We're going to take our time. But the oversight, in my humble opinion, with that is, when we have got uncertainty, that creates an emotional response from us, because we like certainty. But we're also used to the fact, managers and leaders in the room, that we can't always have certainty, and we have to sit with it for a while. And we have to, don't we? And we know as well, in terms of our anchors, that we can't control everything, but we just need to control as much as we can. And we know sometimes the goalposts change, and that's what we deal with all the time, complexity, particularly when you've got a political dimension. And we know sometimes decisions are made that aren't necessarily fair, but that's life. And we know that. We know that. But when we say about this process, well, let's take our time in terms of what happens post-vesting day and how it looks. Again, not prompted, but my experience and my advice would be that has a first consequence, because people have to sit with uncertainty for much longer. And if you want a high-performing organisation with high-performing people and the right culture, you need to be making decisions and providing certainty sooner rather than later, because what happens is people feel threatened. And when people feel threatened, what's triggered is their fight, flight, freeze responses. And it's time limited, because when you operate in these domains of fight, flight, freeze, it's exhausting, it's tiring, and the job is hard enough without all that in the background. So the psychology behind this, and the person-centered approach, the compassionate approach, the hopeful approach, the trusting approach, all those things that came up before with Ken, is really important. This whole thing needs to be much more people-centered. So the pre-vesting day stuff, the practical and technical stuff is really important. The post stuff and the consolidate is really important, but the people-centered stuff is really important. Most people have probably seen a change curve before and seen the kind of, the shock and denial, and then the depression and the distress, and then coming out the other side. And we all go through that, don't we? We all go through it. But the challenge here is to compress that change curve, compress it, get through it quickly. That's one of the key tenets of change and doing change well. Get through it quickly. And the other thing about change is this misnomer that people resist change. Nobody resists change. And it's very upsetting if people are vulnerable about change, they're feeling emotional about it, they want to share that experience, and they're labelled as somebody that is resisting change. They're just going through the curve. They're not resisting change, and they want to be part of it. If you involve people in change, genuinely, and one of my other learning experiences with LGR was that although there was efforts to consult and involve people, it felt a little bit performative rather than real. And when you get that ground rush, so you have an 18-month leading period and you've had loads of conversations like this, and you'll have more after this, and you all come together, but not necessarily with decisions and accountabilities about what's going to happen and who's going to be involved. And then all the decisions get made at the 11th hour, just before vesting day. That doesn't leave a good legacy. It doesn't. So it's involving people in the change in a genuine way, where they're genuinely involved in decisions and can see the accountability for those decisions in the lead in the plan, so the transition plan and thereafter. That's really important. Now, it's really easy for me to say, it's much harder to do. This is really hard because it's all really complicated. And actually, for councils, leisure might not be their top priority. They've got children's services, got adult services, they've got health, they've got all these other things. But there's a point there for us in the room today, and the point is that we know that. We know leisure's not going to be the top priority. So how can we act unilaterally to do the partnership work now, to get together, to get as much alignment as we can, so we can be prepared for decisions that might be made on our behalf, but we can inform them really well, because they're only going to start thinking about us at the last minute, because they're looking at the other bigger stuff first. And that's really important. And consultation's a funny thing, isn't it? And this works at two levels for the people in the room. So the first one is people in the council, senior directors in the council might be thinking, well, we know all about leisure, so we'll make the decision when it comes around. We know what the crack is. But they don't really, because it's you people that know about leisure, not the people upstairs in the council offices. You know about it. But it also works at your level as well, because the people at the coalface in your organisations are the people that really know what's going on, and they really know what the problems are and might be going through this process. So as leaders and managers, we don't always know as much as we think we do we? And this research tells us that. So the consultation, the communication needs to go right down to the coalface and needs to be genuinely engaging. And if anyone's got the answer to how you do that, please let me know, because I don't know yet. But I know that I will die in a ditch trying to do it. And that's the message today. So what is the main focus? This is pre and post vesting day. I would argue the main focus is there. It's creating a unified vision, and you can start that today in the room. And I think from speaking to some people that I already know, you've already got those strategic alliances anywhere, or you're forming them and deepening them already. And if there's people sat outside that East Lancs group, I'd get in that group. So you've certainly got your chief execs or your service leads meeting together, you're forming those alliances, and you're starting to think, what does the vision look like? Because that vision is so powerful to share with your teams back at the ranch and reaffirm it time and time again. It's like Ken said earlier, it's going to be good. This is the hope. This is the vision. Look at what we're aiming for. We're not quite sure how we're going to get there yet, but we are committed to this. You can start that conversation now. Pooling expertise, really important. There's loads of experts in the room. Some of you would directly overlap between roles and responsibilities. So how can you leverage that? How can you improve that? If some of you have, for example, and this comes back to a soft alignment point I'm going to make as well. If you have got vacant positions coming up and stuff like that, could you be creative? Could you employ across organisations? Could you do stuff like that? It's a win-win. It's going to save you money and it's going to deepen the partnership. It's genuine collaboration, not performative collaboration. It's genuine collaboration. Just because we're in the room and we're talking about it doesn't mean we're collaborating. But if we're putting some money into a pool and actually we're doing stuff like that, we are genuinely collaborating. We are committed. This aligns with the vision that we've been talking about. And you can do that. I haven't seen that happen, by the way. I did suggest it, but I didn't get my way. I'm not saying I'm right, but I think that's the way I would do it. Maintaining trust and morale, again, that comes out of vision and purpose and, genuine collaboration and communication. And cultural integration. So we talk about culture, we talk about values, we talk about behaviours and stuff like that. How about a conversation across your organisations about, what values do we share? How do they translate into behaviours? What does that look like in terms of our management and leadership behaviour? How can we demonstrate and model that? How do we do that with intention and with planning rather than just talking about it? And take that really seriously. It's really important because this stuff gets talked about by everyone in the room. I'm sure it does. And I used to talk about it a lot, but I didn't intentionally act on it every day. This is the time, this is your biggest leadership challenge. This really is huge. If you can lean back on a strong set of shared values which are modelled in your behaviours and are really communicated to the people and you're held to account on them, that's really going to help. Because there is going to be some difficult decisions. There is. These Nolan principles, way back in the day, applying for a job for a council, I remember these were on the person spec, the Nolan principles of the public sector, and there's kind of 7 of them, and they were invented in the 1950s, and still very relevant today. Some of those may be reflected in the values of your organisation. This is the kind of common set of values and behaviours that really we're leaning back on. But how many of you can actually say, yes, you know, I've never contravened these values, or I've never worked with people that that have always stayed true to these values? You know, this is the real test now of your values-based leadership. And to make it not about being performative, but actually something that you implement intentionally and do, you need to plan for it. So this people-centered approach needs an intentional plan behind it. So you can plan for making sure you've got alignment in terms of safe and legal. You know, your contracts are right, you know, you've got, you understand who's doing the health and safety, your audits, your compliance and all that kind of stuff. You've got all that. Yeah, you do that every day. You're really good at that. But what about your intention around people planning, around culture, values, behaviour, around shared vision, purpose, how that's reflected, how you're developing and supporting people around trust and morale? Have you got intention behind that? And if you've not got a plan, you've not got genuine intention. You've not got a plan with responsibilities, with accountabilities, with measures of success. What does it look like? You've probably got that for all your other stuff, your technical stuff. You might not have it for your people stuff. So this is a framework that I've used. It follows 4 areas. The first 3 deliver the real outcome, which is an environment where people feel genuinely empowered and engaged. Purpose, so what's your why? Talked about that. Direction, okay, where are we going? What does success look like? Whose role is it? How are we going to measure that? How are we going to hold each other to account in terms of our behaviours and our values and our purpose and everything else? And what kind of mindset have we got? How are we creating a mindset in our organisation where people feel, actually, we can't control everything. We can influence some things, but not everything. Sometimes the goalposts will change. Sometimes it's not always fair, but that's the space that we're focused in and we're comfortable with that mindset. Really important. And I Googled what does good governance look like to prepare for this presentation. And that's what it came up with. And then I look back at the framework I've just talked about and some of the lessons learned and experience, and it's just a good governance. That's all it is. But there's probably things on there we don't always get right. And I think the message today is double down on this. Double down on it. Have a plan around this. It's really important. So let's look back at the narrative just as a bit of a helping hand. So same narrative as before. So Nolan principles, having a plan, modelling behaviours and values. How about this? Is that the kind of stuff? Is that how you can frame it? Are you prepared for that level of honesty? Right down the organisation with each other? Is that the stuff that can bind you together rather than separate you? So you become one team before you get into the unitary, because you're going to be one team. I think you can, because there's something special about leisure people. You know, the camaraderie, you care, you know, there is something special. You know, and you can be at the cutting edge of all this. So what can you do? So strategic alliance we've talked about with a purpose behind it. And I think one of your purposes might be, look, how are we going to look after the people? How are we going to kind of build on what Mark said in terms of let's have a plan around how we're going to have to look after each other as people and our teams through this? And does that start with what success looks like? And we're going to have a conversation about that, how we're going to behave, how we're going to support each other, all that kind of stuff, where we can get soft alignment, all that. Can you do that? Engagement with stakeholders. You know that as a bigger entity, you've got real opportunities to engage with stakeholders at a kind of regional, sub-regional, national level. You know, so who's going to do that? Are you replicating all that? Are you going to say, actually, this is an opportunity for us to collaborate now? Let's get together as a team, right? Who's going to Who's going to pick who on behalf of everybody to have those stakeholder conversations? You can do that. You can act unilaterally. You don't need permission from your councils to do that, do you? You can get on with it and do that as a team now, as a team approach. Shared audit, really useful, and the ops people in the room will love this. But loads of things you can audit around the technical aspects of your businesses. You may be doing that already, just to know how you're doing things, where other organisations might be doing them better than you, where you can improve, where you can get alignment over those things. You know, an easy one might be, how can we join up in terms of our voice to communities, how we raise awareness and market what we do? Can we have more of a joined up effort on that starting now? Can we do that? You know, that's a joint way of working. What we did in North Yorkshire is we used a Quest framework to go and audit, or we bastardised it, so we had a bit less of an involved Quest framework, and we went and everybody did it, and then we went round to each other's organisations, and it started to really build up a conversation against a framework where we could audit what was going on. And it brought loads of insight out, and what it also did, it helped engage everybody in our teams, right down to the operational level, duty manager level and below, and it was really effective. But if you do that, you've got to keep momentum, because it's like, well, where does that audit go? It's not just got to be an audit as in, you know, a paper exercise. It's got to go somewhere, and that's got to go into a plan. So this is what we learn, this is what we're going to do, and this is who's going to lead by when. But what happened in North Yorkshire is we did all that, and then it was, well, we can't actually do anything until after vesting day, until we've sorted out what the new organisation is going to look like. No, we don't. We can do it now. We're all mates. You know, we can do it. And it got kind of kicked into the long grass for whatever reason. We didn't take it into action. So it didn't become the positive thing that it was meant to do. It actually became something that was a bit negative, as in, well, that was a waste of time, wasn't it? It wasn't a waste of time, but the perception was at the time, because we didn't take it into a smart plan and start delivering on it before vesting day, which we could have done. And then that kind of softer alignment as well. So takeaways, collaboration, communication and culture is, I think, what frames what I've been trying to say. And collaboration in the sense of a deep, meaningful, authentic collaboration, not a performative one. So you're actually doing stuff, you're sharing and doing stuff. Communication, really difficult. Difficult enough in your own organisations where you've got facilities across a different geographical area and stuff like that. But really important to focus on. And all those different cultures that you've got merging together, where are your commonalities? Really important, and leverage those commonalities. So that's me. Any questions?